lecture, but at the outset I have to tell you something. This lecture was prepared for the general audience, not for electrical engineering experts or those who are going to be experts in future. Now, as mentioned, my topic is the new Electricity Act, which came into power April, passed in Parliament in March 2009, and it was enacted from 8th of April 2009. Now, let me start with the question, why is this new legislation necessary? Maybe a trivial question for many countries, but in Sri Lanka, we were discussing this question for a period longer than 10 years. This discussion started in mid-90s, and different governments were going through that. So there were extensive discussions with the trade unions, political parties, and 3 different acts were prepared. And the first one was passed in the Parliament, but it did not come to power because the Parliament was dissolved. And the second one was rejected by the Supreme Court of the country and was not taken for debate. The third one was taken for debate and passed and was enacted also. But in some countries, that sort of legislation or that sort of reform has taken very short period, like 6 months. In Eastern European countries, after the political change, they have gone through these reforms in a very short time. Some countries have managed to do that within 6 months. Now, by telling this, I am going to point out the time we waste on issues like this. We were discussing whether we are going to get a coal power station for 20 years. And we will be discussing for another 20 years whether we are going to have nuclear power plant or not. And for this new legislation also, we have taken over 20 years as a result. So why was this new legislation necessary? The former Electricity Act, Act number 19 of 1950, is 59, almost 60 years old. Since this act was passed, the electrical industry in the country has expanded drastically. The capacity at that time was just 25 glass. Today it is 2,600 glass. And there will be more power stations getting added next year. The consumer base has grown drastically. At that time, it was only 17,000 people. Now, it is approaching 4.5 million. And within the next few years, it will come to the level of 5 million. And some of the provisions in the former Act were inconsistent with the 1978 Constitution. Nobody has taken that to the court, but there were certain things which were inconsistent with the Constitution. And elsewhere in the world, electricity industry went through reforms. And as you all know, electricity industry needs a lot of investment. Capital intensive plants, transmission lines, power plants are very costly. And sometimes we are unable to generate funds locally for this. We have to depend on donors like World Bank, IET, and other people like Kodak and so on. And these donors want to make sure that such investments are properly done in the country and brings benefits to the general public. So, donors welcome reform. And in last few years, after identifying that these reforms are not going through, many people like World Bank withdrew from Sri Lanka and stopped investing in power. And with this legislation, ADB has come up with a big loan, huge loan to CDB. And there's a second and third stage of and the process will go on after this enactment. In addition to that, the government identified the need for separation of policy and regulation. I will come to that later, the separation of policy and regulation. Actually, you all know that the past century, the 20th century, brought a lot of developments in electronics and communication. And people say it is the century of the electron. And there were so many developments in that. Electronic devices are used everywhere, in computing, in communication, in household equipment, and so on. But this year, the energy is going to be very important. This century is the century of the year, century of the energy. And people say it is the century of the photon, because it stimulates energy. So energy side is going to play a huge role in this century we have energy. So that is one reason why we need reforms in the energy and electricity sector to ensure that it grows very fast and it provides the services needed by the country for its users. Now, one of the main discussion points were that this brings privatization, this act, restructuring of existing PV and so on. But this act does not bring any privatization. PV is not privatized in any form. And there is no restructuring either. PV is not restructured. Actually, in the 2002 Act, it was planned to break PV into 5 or 6 small companies headed by separate boards, governing boards, and headed by separate GAs. Such a thing is not planned in this Act. There is no provision for such activity. But the restructuring is limited to so-called functional ring fencing. The activities in electrical industry is separated for generation, transmission, and distribution. And these activities, distribution is again separated for 4 different regions, and these activities are done separately as a separate business. Finance flows, material flows, work flows will be separated and separated. And that is the only change that is brought by acting that way. In addition to that, it separates the regulation from the Ministry of Power and Energy and empowers the separate authority, that is Public Utilities Commission, to do the regulation in the industry. Now, the new structure under this Act will be, there is the same board as earlier, and it will govern all activities of CP. And there will be one GM, and there will be 6 licenses. 6 licenses will be given to Srilanka. They are already given actually. There were some objection at the beginning to giving 6 licenses. They requested only 3 licenses. But somehow, now this history, 6 licenses are given to PV. The 6 licenses are 1 for generation, 1 for transmission, and 4 distribution licenses for the 4 regions already identified in CP. In addition to that, there is another distribution license given to LECO. So there are 5 distribution licenses. And a lot of generation licenses are given to small generators, mini hydro generators, and private power operators. And even if CEB starts a new generating plant, such as Moratuwa, there will be a separate license for that. And there will be a separate responsible person for administration of the each license activity. And they are responsible to GM. And GM will interfere if there are problems to be resolved between licenses, and GM will have a role to play bringing problems of the licenses to the CD board for decision. But now we are facing some resistance